What legitimate reason could you possibly have for hanging around with someone like that? The cruel words echoed through the school hallway as a wealthy student publicly humiliated Marcus for his mysterious lunch meetings. But what Derek Manning and the school administrators didn't know was that the homeless vagrant Marcus had been feeding was about to change everything. For 15 days, 17-year-old Marcus Johnson had been sharing his meager lunch with a man living behind the school dumpsters. The boy's kindness was repaid with accusations of drug dealing, theft, and criminal behavior. His reputation was destroyed, his character questioned, and his future at the elite school hanging by a thread. But when 12 Navy SEALs in full-dress uniform marched through the school's front doors, everyone realized they had gravely underestimated both Marcus and the man he'd been helping. Dear viewer, if you are watching my story for the first time, I humbly request you write the location from where you are watching right now, subscribe this channel and press the bell icon now not to miss the notifications of my daily published new stories. Thank you, and let's dive into the full story. Marcus Johnson adjusted his worn backpack as he walked around the back of Lincoln High School, seeking a quiet spot to eat his lunch away from the judgmental stares of his classmates. At 17, he'd learned to navigate the social hierarchy of his school carefully. Staying invisible was often the safest option for someone wearing second-hand clothes at a school where designer brands were the norm. As he rounded the corner near the dumpsters, Marcus spotted a figure huddled against the brick wall. The man appeared to be in his 40s, with weathered skin, graying hair that needed cutting, and clothes that had seen better days. Despite his rough appearance, there was something about his posture, straight-backed even while sitting, that suggested a different story than typical homelessness. "Excuse me," Marcus said softly, not wanting to startle the man. "Are you okay?" The man looked up with piercing blue eyes that seemed to assess Marcus in a single glance. "I'm fine, son. Just resting." Marcus noticed the man's clothes were clean despite being worn, and his speech was articulate, educated. Something about him didn't fit the stereotype of homelessness that most people expected. "When's the last time you ate?" Marcus asked, though he already suspected the answer. "Don't worry about me, kid. You've got your own concerns." Marcus looked down at his simple lunch, a peanut butter sandwich, an apple, and a small bag of chips that his mother had packed for him. It wasn't much, but it was probably more than this man had. Without hesitation, Marcus held out half his sandwich. "Here. I'm not that hungry anyway." The man studied Marcus for a long moment. "You sure about that? You look like you could use every bite yourself." "I'm sure," Marcus replied, sitting down beside the man on the concrete. "I'm Marcus, by the way." "You can call me Riley," the man said, accepting the food with dignity that suggested he wasn't accustomed to charity. "Thank you, Marcus. This is very kind." As they ate in comfortable silence, Marcus noticed details about Riley that intrigued him. The man's boots were old but well-maintained, his posture remained military straight, and his eyes constantly scanned their surroundings, not with the paranoia of mental illness, but with the alertness of someone trained to assess threats. "You don't have to sit back here," Riley said after finishing the sandwich. "I'm sure you have friends to eat with." Marcus shrugged. "Not really. I prefer the quiet back here anyway." Riley nodded understanding. Sometimes the best company is the kind that doesn't require explanations. When the lunch bell rang, Marcus gathered his things. "Same time tomorrow?" he asked casually. "You don't need to." "I want to," Marcus interrupted gently. "If that's okay with you." As Marcus walked back toward the school building, Riley watched him go with an expression that mixed gratitude with something deeper, respect for a young man who'd shown kindness without judgment or expectation. Neither of them could have predicted that this simple act of compassion would set in motion events that would change both their lives forever. Ms. Patricia Whitmore stood at the front of her economics classroom like a general surveying her troops. Her perfectly pressed blazer and carefully styled hair reflected her belief that appearance and social status were indicators of personal worth. Today's lesson on personal responsibility and economic success was one of her favorites, an opportunity to reinforce the social order she believed in. Class, today we're discussing the factors that contribute to economic mobility, she announced, her gaze sweeping over the 30 students before settling on Marcus, who sat in the back corner. Some people seem to think that success is just a matter of luck or circumstance, but research shows that personal choices are the primary determinant of financial outcomes. Derek Manning, a blonde teenager whose father owned half the commercial real estate in town, raised his hand eagerly. Ms. Whitmore, what about people who claim they can't succeed because of their background? Isn't that just making excuses? Excellent question, Derek, Ms. Whitmore smiled approvingly. Let's examine that concept. Marcus Johnson, would you share with the class what your family's approximate annual income is? Marcus felt his stomach drop. Every eye in the room turned to him, and he could sense the anticipation of his classmates who knew this was going to be uncomfortable. I don't think that's relevant to the lesson, Marcus replied quietly. Oh, but it is, Ms. Whitmore pressed. You see, class, Marcus here receives free lunch, which means his family income is below the poverty threshold. This makes him an excellent case study for our discussion about personal responsibility. The room fell silent except for a few stifled snickers from Derek's group. Marcus felt heat rising in his cheeks but maintained his composure. Marcus, would you explain to the class why your family hasn't been able to achieve economic stability? What choices led to your current circumstances? Marcus stared at his desk, knowing that any response would only make things worse. He thought about his mother working double shifts as a nurse's aide, sacrificing her own health to keep their small apartment and put food on the table. Derek's voice cut through the silence. Maybe some people just aren't meant to succeed. I mean, look at the statistics, certain communities have higher poverty rates for a reason, right? Several students shifted uncomfortably at the racist undertone, but Ms. Whitmore nodded as if Derek had made a profound observation. That's an interesting perspective, Derek. Marcus, how do you respond to the suggestion that cultural factors might influence economic outcomes? Marcus finally looked up, his voice steady despite his anger. I think that people who've never experienced real struggle shouldn't make assumptions about what causes it. My mother works harder than anyone in this room, and she's worth 10 of people who inherited everything they have. That's exactly the kind of defensive attitude that perpetuates poverty, Ms. Whitmore replied coldly. Until you take responsibility for your circumstances instead of blaming others, you'll remain trapped in that cycle. The bell rang, saving Marcus from further humiliation. As students filed out, he heard Derek whisper to his friends, no wonder he sits alone at lunch. Who wants to associate with that attitude? Marcus gathered his books slowly, waiting for the room to empty. As he walked toward the door, Ms. Whitmore called after him. Marcus, I hope you'll reflect on today's lesson. Understanding personal responsibility is the first step toward improving your situation. Marcus paused at the doorway without turning around. Yes, ma'am. I'll remember exactly what I learned here today. As he walked down the hallway, Marcus felt the familiar weight of being judged for circumstances beyond his control. But he also felt something else, a strengthening resolve to prove that kindness and character mattered more than bank account balances or family names. Behind the school, Riley was waiting. The routine developed naturally over the next 2 weeks. Every day at lunch, Marcus would slip out the back door of Lincoln High and find Riley waiting in their usual spot behind the building. What started as sharing half a sandwich had evolved into Marcus bringing extra food whenever possible, a piece of fruit from breakfast, leftover dinner from the night before, or snacks he'd skip eating himself. You know, you don't have to keep doing this, Riley said on the 10th day, accepting a thermos of soup that Marcus's mother had made. I can tell you're going without to feed me. Marcus settled beside him on the concrete steps they'd claimed as their lunch spot. My mom always made too much soup anyway, he lied smoothly. The truth was that Angela Johnson had noticed her son eating smaller portions at home and had started packing extra food without asking questions, understanding instinctively that her son was helping someone. Riley studied Marcus with those sharp blue eyes. Your mother sounds like a good woman. The best, Marcus agreed. She works at the hospital, 2 jobs, actually. Morning shift as a nurse's aide, evening shift in the cafeteria. Says she's saving for my college fund, but I know most of it goes to keeping us afloat. What do you want to study? Engineering, maybe. Or social work. Something that helps people. Marcus paused. What about you? What did you do before? Riley was quiet for so long that Marcus thought he wouldn't answer. Finally, he spoke. I served my country for 22 years. Did my duty, followed orders, tried to make a difference. Military? Riley nodded. Navy. Specialized operations. When I came home the last time, things were different. Harder to adjust than I expected. Lost my apartment, then my job, then everything else pretty much fell apart. Marcus felt a surge of anger at a system that could abandon someone who'd served for over 2 decades. That's not right. You shouldn't be out here after serving that long. Life doesn't always follow the rules we think it should, Riley said philosophically. But meeting you has reminded me that there's still good in the world. Your kindness means more than you know. What Marcus didn't know was that Riley had been watching the dynamics at Lincoln High more carefully than he let on. He'd witnessed Derek Manning and his friends cornering Marcus near the parking lot yesterday, calling him names and threatening to put him in his place. He'd seen Ms. Whitmore's obvious favoritism toward wealthy students and her casual cruelty toward those less fortunate. Riley had also noticed the principal, Mr. Ashford, glancing disapprovingly toward the back of the school during lunch periods, clearly suspicious of Marcus's daily disappearances. That afternoon, as Marcus returned to school after their lunch, Riley pulled out a phone that looked far more sophisticated than what a homeless man should possess. He scrolled through contacts until he found a number he hadn't called in over 2 years. Torres, came the crisp voice on the other end. Sarah, it's Ghost, Riley said, using his old military call sign. The pause on the other end was long. Commander. Jesus, we thought you were, where have you been? That's a long story. Listen, I need a favor. Actually, I need the team. Sir, you know we'd do anything for you. What's the situation? Riley watched through the school windows as Marcus entered his afternoon classes, probably to face more subtle humiliation from teachers and classmates who saw him as less worthy because of his economic circumstances. There's a kid here who's been taking care of me for 2 weeks. Good kid, probably the best person I've met in years. But he's catching hell from people who think they're better than him because they have money. You want us to have a conversation with some people? Riley smiled grimly. I want us to remind some folks about the importance of treating good people with respect. Think you can round up the old team? For you, Commander. We'll be there tomorrow. As Riley ended the call, he felt something he hadn't experienced in months: purpose. Marcus Johnson had no idea that his simple acts of kindness had just set in motion the arrival of 12 of America's most elite warriors. The people who'd been dismissing and humiliating Marcus were about to learn exactly who they'd been underestimating. Principal Robert Ashford prided himself on running a tight ship at Lincoln High School. In his 15 years as principal, he'd maintained the school's reputation as a premier institution, largely by ensuring that problematic students didn't disrupt the learning environment for families who contributed significantly to the school's fundraising efforts. Which was why Marcus Johnson's recent behavior concerned him. Ms. Whitmore, thank you for coming, he said as the economics teacher entered his office for their scheduled meeting. I wanted to discuss one of your students, Marcus Johnson. Patricia Whitmore settled into the leather chair across from his mahogany desk, her expression already disapproving. That boy has been nothing but trouble in my class. Disrespectful, defensive, and clearly resistant to learning about personal responsibility. I've noticed he's been leaving campus every day during lunch period, Ashford said, consulting his notes. Security cameras show him heading behind the building toward the dumpster area. He stays back there for the entire lunch period, then returns just before afternoon classes. That's highly suspicious, Whitmore agreed. Students don't spend that much time in isolated areas unless they're up to something inappropriate. Ashford nodded gravely. My thoughts exactly. Combined with his family's financial situation and his general attitude problems, I'm concerned we may have a drug situation developing. The office door opened as Ms. Jennifer Martinez, the school counselor, arrived for the meeting. Unlike the other two, she genuinely cared about student welfare regardless of their economic background. Jennifer, we were just discussing Marcus Johnson's suspicious lunch behavior, Ashford said. Given your expertise in behavioral issues, what's your assessment? Ms. Martinez frowned. Suspicious how? Marcus is one of the most respectful, hard-working students I know. His grades are excellent despite working part-time to help his family. That's exactly the point, Whitmore interjected. Where does a boy from his background get money for drugs? He's probably dealing to afford his supposed part-time job. That's a serious accusation without any evidence, Ms. Martinez replied, her voice sharp with disapproval. The evidence is his behavior pattern, Ashford explained. Daily trips to isolated areas, secretive about his activities, defensive when questioned. Classic signs of drug involvement. Ms. Martinez shook her head. Or classic signs of a teenager who needs privacy for any number of innocent reasons. Have you considered that he might just want quiet time away from social pressures? Jennifer, I appreciate your optimism, but we can't ignore red flags, Ashford said. Mrs. Manning called this morning expressing concerns about the influence certain students might have on her son Derek. She specifically mentioned Marcus as someone who seems to be involved in questionable activities. Eleanor Manning is concerned about any student who doesn't drive a BMW to school, Ms. Martinez replied bluntly. Whitmore gasped at the counselor's directness. That's completely inappropriate, Jennifer. Mrs. Manning is a valued member of our school community. So is Marcus Johnson, Ms. Martinez shot back. And unlike Derek Manning, Marcus has never been suspended for cheating, never been caught with alcohol at school events, and never had his parents threaten to sue the school when he faces consequences for his actions. Ashford's face reddened. Those incidents were isolated mistakes by a young man under pressure. Marcus Johnson represents a different kind of problem, one that could reflect poorly on our school's reputation if not addressed. What exactly are you proposing? Ms. Martinez asked, though she dreaded the answer. A formal investigation, Ashford replied. Security will monitor his lunch activities more closely. If we find evidence of drug involvement, we'll proceed with disciplinary action up to and including expulsion. Ms. Martinez stood up abruptly. This is ridiculous. You're targeting a good kid because he's poor and because Eleanor Manning doesn't like him associating with her son. We're protecting our school community, Whitmore corrected coldly. Sometimes that requires making difficult decisions about students who don't share our values. As Ms. Martinez left the office in disgust, Ashford and Whitmore exchanged satisfied looks. I'll have security begin enhanced monitoring tomorrow, Ashford said. Whatever Marcus Johnson is hiding back there, we're going to find out. Neither administrator could have imagined that their investigation would soon bring them face to face with people who actually understood the meaning of service, sacrifice, and protecting those who couldn't protect themselves. Derek Manning strutted through the hallways of Lincoln High like he owned them, which, given his family's contributions to the school, wasn't far from the truth. His designer clothes and expensive watch announced his status to anyone who might forget, and his circle of equally privileged friends reinforced his position at the top of the social hierarchy. I'm telling you guys, something's definitely up with Scholarship Boy, Derek announced to his group during their free period. My mom says the administration is finally taking notice of his suspicious behavior. Tyler, his closest friend and fellow trust fund recipient, leaned in conspiratorially. What kind of suspicious behavior? Sneaking around behind the school every day, disappearing for the entire lunch period. Obviously dealing drugs or stealing stuff. I mean, how else would someone like him survive here? The group murmured agreement, their prejudices confirming what they wanted to believe about Marcus. Meanwhile, in the main office, Mrs. Eleanor Manning sat across from Principal Ashford, her designer handbag and perfectly manicured nails reflecting her sense of entitlement. "Robert, I'm increasingly concerned about the declining standards at this institution," she said, her voice carrying the authority of someone whose family's donations funded half the school's programs. "Derek tells me there are students here engaging in clearly illegal activities." "We're taking the situation very seriously, Eleanor," Ashford assured her. "Marcus Johnson is under investigation, and if we find evidence of wrongdoing, he'll be removed immediately." "Good. I didn't spend $40,000 last year on the new computer lab just to watch this school's reputation decline because you're afraid to deal with problem students." At lunchtime, Derek decided to take matters into his own hands. He gathered his friends near the back entrance of the school, positioning themselves to catch Marcus in whatever illegal activity they were convinced he was conducting. "There he goes," Tyler whispered as Marcus slipped out the back door with his lunch bag. "Look how secretive he's being." Derek pulled out his phone. "I'm recording this. When we catch him dealing drugs or whatever, we'll have proof." What they didn't see was Riley, who had positioned himself where he could observe both Marcus's arrival and any potential trouble. After 2 weeks of watching Marcus navigate the hostile environment of Lincoln High, Riley had developed protective instincts toward the young man who'd shown him such kindness. "Stay here and watch," Derek told his friends. "I'm going to confront him directly." As Derek rounded the corner with his phone ready, he expected to find Marcus engaged in some sort of criminal activity. Instead, he saw something that stopped him cold: Marcus sitting peacefully beside a homeless man, sharing his lunch and having what appeared to be a genuine conversation. Derek's mind raced to process this unexpected scene. This wasn't the drug deal or theft he'd anticipated. This was charity. Kindness. The concepts were so foreign to Derek's worldview that he initially couldn't comprehend what he was witnessing. But his prejudices quickly reasserted themselves. If Marcus wasn't dealing drugs, he must be up to something else equally inappropriate. No one from his background could possibly be motivated by simple human compassion. Riley, meanwhile, had spotted Derek's phone and realized they were being recorded. His military training kicked in, assessing the tactical situation. The boy with the phone represented a threat to Marcus, and Riley was done watching good people get hurt by those who thought privilege gave them the right to attack others. For the first time in months, Commander James "Ghost" Riley began planning an operation. But this wouldn't be a military mission in some distant combat zone. This would be a lesson in respect delivered right here at Lincoln High School. The war was about to begin, and the privileged bullies had no idea what they'd just started. The next day, Derek Manning had worked himself into righteous indignation. Armed with his recorded video and bolstered by his mother's influence, he decided it was time to expose Marcus Johnson's inappropriate behavior to the entire school. He chose the crowded main hallway during the morning break, ensuring maximum visibility for his confrontation. Students gathered quickly when Derek's voice rose above the normal chatter. "Hey, Marcus." Derek called out, his phone already recording. "I think everyone deserves to know what you're really doing during lunch every day." Marcus felt his stomach drop as he turned to face Derek, surrounded by an increasingly large crowd of students. He could see phones being pulled out, ready to capture whatever humiliation Derek had planned. "I don't know what you're talking about, Derek," Marcus replied quietly, hoping to defuse the situation. "Oh, you don't?" Derek's voice dripped with false innocence. "So you're not sneaking around behind the school every day? You're not meeting with some homeless drug addict back there?" The crowd murmured with interest. Ms. Whitmore, who happened to be passing by, stopped to observe, clearly pleased that Marcus was finally being exposed. "I eat lunch wherever I want," Marcus said, maintaining his dignity despite the hostile crowd. "Right, and I'm sure it's just a coincidence that you're hanging around with vagrants," Derek continued. "Everyone knows people like you are involved in drug dealing. What are you selling to that bum? What are you buying from him?" Marcus felt anger rising in his chest, but he forced himself to remain calm. You don't know anything about me or my situation. I know enough, Derek shot back. I know you don't belong at this school. I know you're here on charity, and clearly you're taking advantage of that charity to run some kind of operation. The crowd was growing larger, and Marcus could see the mix of curiosity, judgment, and entertainment on their faces. To them, this was just drama, someone else's humiliation for their amusement. Derek, you need to stop, Marcus said firmly. You're making accusations you can't prove. Can't prove? Derek held up his phone triumphantly. I've got video of you with that homeless guy. What legitimate reason could you possibly have for hanging around with someone like that? Marcus found himself trapped. He couldn't reveal the truth about Riley without exposing the man to potential harassment or worse. He couldn't explain his daily visits without betraying Riley's trust and privacy. My personal life is none of your business, Marcus said. Your personal life becomes everyone's business when it involves criminal activity, Derek pressed. Are you dealing drugs, Marcus? Are you stealing food from the cafeteria to trade for drugs? Is that how someone like you affords to eat here? Ms. Whitmore stepped forward, seeing an opportunity to validate her prejudices. Marcus, these are serious allegations. If you have nothing to hide, you should be able to explain your behavior. Marcus looked around at the sea of faces, some hostile, some curious, but none showing the slightest bit of compassion or understanding. These people had already judged him guilty based on nothing more than his economic status and Derek's accusations. I don't owe any of you an explanation, Marcus said, his voice carrying a strength that surprised even him. You've all decided what kind of person I am based on assumptions and prejudice. Nothing I say will change that. See? Derek announced to the crowd. Guilty conscience. If he was innocent, he'd have no problem explaining himself. What none of them noticed was the figure watching from the school's back entrance, Commander Riley, who had come to check on Marcus and instead witnessed this public humiliation. His jaw was clenched, his military posture rigid with controlled anger. Riley pulled out his sophisticated phone and dialed a number. Torres. It's Ghost. Change of plans. We're not waiting until tomorrow. I need the team here tonight. Full deployment. As Marcus pushed through the hostile crowd, his head high despite the humiliation, Riley began making calls that would bring 12 of America's most elite warriors to Lincoln High School. The people who thought they could destroy a good kid's reputation with impunity were about to learn what real consequences looked like. That evening, Riley sat in the abandoned warehouse where he'd been sleeping, staring at the burned phone that connected him to his former life. For months, he'd avoided reaching out to his old team, too proud and too broken to ask for help. But watching Marcus endure that public humiliation had awakened something in him, the protective instincts of a leader who'd never abandoned his people. He dialed the first number. Stone. The voice was crisp, professional, instantly alert. Captain, it's Ghost. The silence on the other end lasted several heartbeats. Commander Riley. Sir, where the hell have you been? We've been looking for you for 8 months. That's not important right now, Mike. I need the team. All of them. Full combat deployment. Sir, are you in danger? What's the threat assessment? Riley smiled grimly. The threat is to a 17-year-old kid who's been keeping me alive for the past 2 weeks. And the enemy is a bunch of privileged bullies who think they can destroy good people without consequences. Captain Stone's tone shifted to full attention. Give me the details, Commander. Riley explained the situation, Marcus's daily kindness, the systematic harassment from Derek and the school administration, and the public humiliation that morning. With each detail, Stone's anger became more evident. These people have no idea what they're dealing with, Stone said when Riley finished. How many team members do you want? All of them. I want these people to understand exactly who they've been targeting. The next call was to Lieutenant Sarah Torres, his former intelligence specialist. Ghost. Her voice was filled with relief and fury. Do you have any idea how worried we've been? Tank's been running ops to find you for months. Sarah, I need you to coordinate something for me. How quickly can you get the team to Lincoln High School? How quickly do you need us there? Tomorrow morning. Full dress uniform. I want these people to see exactly what honor and service look like. The third call was to Sergeant David "Tank" Williams, his explosives expert and closest friend on the team. Commander. Jesus, sir, where have you been hiding? The whole team's been going crazy trying to track you down. Tank, I need a favor. Actually, I need 12 favors. You know we're with you, sir. Whatever you need. Riley outlined his plan while Tank listened with growing amusement and determination. So let me get this straight, Tank said when Riley finished. Some rich punk and his teacher friends have been bullying a kid who's been taking care of you. And they think they can get away with it because they have money? That's about the size of it. Tank's laugh was dangerous. Sir, it's going to be my absolute pleasure to explain some basic concepts about respect to these people. Should we bring the full kit? Dress blues, full ribbons, the works. I want them to see exactly what they're dealing with. As Riley made call after call, each team member's response was immediate and unquestioning. These were men and women who'd followed him into the most dangerous places on earth, who'd trusted him with their lives countless times. The idea that someone had been mistreating their commander while he was down was unacceptable. By midnight, 12 of America's most elite warriors were mobilizing toward Lincoln High School, their mission clear: protect Marcus Johnson and teach some very important lessons about honor, respect, and the consequences of bullying those who serve others. Principal Ashford and Derek Manning had no idea that their target was under the protection of the deadliest team in the U.S. military. The cavalry was coming, and they were not in a mood to negotiate. At 0500 hours, 12 Navy SEALs converged on a secure location 15 miles from Lincoln High School. They moved with the precision and silence that had made them legends in the special operations community, each one carrying the weight of their shared mission: protect their commander and the young man who'd shown him kindness. Captain Michael Stone stood before his assembled team in the pre-dawn darkness, his voice carrying the authority of someone who'd led these warriors through countless dangerous missions. Listen up. Today's operation is personal. Commander Riley, Ghost, has been surviving on the streets for 8 months. A 17-year-old kid named Marcus Johnson has been feeding him, protecting him, showing him the kind of humanity that reminds us why we serve. Lieutenant Sarah Torres checked her service ribbons, ensuring her dress uniform was perfect. What's the opposition looking like, Captain? Rich kids, entitled teachers, and administrators who think poverty makes you criminal, Stone replied grimly. They've been systematically humiliating this kid, and yesterday they staged a public confrontation trying to destroy his reputation. Sergeant David "Tank" Williams, a mountain of a man with arms like tree trunks, cracked his knuckles with anticipation. These people have no idea what they just stepped in. Petty Officer First Class Martinez, the team's communications specialist, looked up from his equipment. What's the mission parameters, sir? Are we going in soft or hard? We're going in professional, Stone emphasized. Full dress uniform, by-the-book military courtesy. But we're also going in overwhelming. These people are going to understand exactly who they've been targeting. Meanwhile, at Lincoln High School, Principal Ashford was preparing for what he expected to be a routine disciplinary hearing. Marcus Johnson's drug-dealing behavior had been reported by several concerned students, and with Mrs. Manning's pressure mounting, he was ready to make an example of the troublesome scholarship student. Ms. Whitmore arrived early, her anticipation barely concealed. Robert, I've prepared a comprehensive case against Marcus Johnson. Between his suspicious behavior, his defensive attitude, and the testimony from Derek and his friends, we have everything we need for expulsion. Excellent, Ashford replied. Mrs. Manning will be pleased that we're finally addressing the criminal element that's been undermining our school's reputation. What they didn't know was that Marcus had spent the night in anguish, knowing that today would likely be his last at Lincoln High. His mother, Angela, had held him while he finally told her everything, about Riley, about the daily harassment, about the impossible choice between protecting a vulnerable veteran and defending his own reputation. "Baby, you did the right thing," Angela had assured him. "Taking care of someone who needed help is never wrong, no matter what those people say." At 0730 hours, the SEAL team began their approach to Lincoln High School. 12 warriors in dress blue uniforms, their chests decorated with ribbons representing combat service in the world's most dangerous places, moved with purpose toward the school entrance. Stone's voice crackled through their concealed communications system. "Remember, we're here to support Ghost and protect Marcus Johnson. Professional deportment, military courtesy, but absolute zero tolerance for disrespect toward our people." Torres adjusted her uniform one final time. "Sir, what if they try to have us removed from the premises?" Tank's voice carried dark amusement. "Ma'am, I'd like to see them try." As the team approached the school, early arriving students stopped and stared. 12 Navy SEALs in full dress uniform was not something typically seen at a suburban high school, and word began spreading rapidly through social media and text messages. Commander Riley, who had cleaned himself up and borrowed a decent shirt, waited at the designated rendezvous point. When he saw his team approaching, emotion threatened to overwhelm him. These were his people, his family, and they had come for him without question or hesitation. "Ghost," Stone said quietly as they assembled. "It's good to see you, sir." "It's good to see all of you," Riley replied, his voice thick with emotion. "Are you ready to remind some people about the meaning of respect?" 12 voices responded in unison, "Huya, Commander." The war for Marcus Johnson's reputation was about to begin, and the opposing force had no idea they were facing America's finest warriors. At 0800 hours, as Lincoln High School's morning routine proceeded normally, 12 Navy SEALs in dress blue uniforms marched through the front entrance with military precision. Their synchronized footsteps echoed through the marble hallways, creating a sound that froze conversations and stopped students in their tracks. The reaction was immediate and electric. Cell phones appeared everywhere as students tried to capture video of the unprecedented sight. Teachers emerged from classrooms, administrators hurried from offices, and within minutes, the entire school was buzzing with speculation about why elite military personnel had arrived on campus. Principal Ashford rushed from his office, his face flushed with confusion and growing panic. "Excuse me. You can't just march into my school without authorization." Captain Stone stepped forward, his bearing radiating the kind of authority that came from leading men in combat. "Sir, I'm Captain Michael Stone, United States Navy Special Operations. We're here on official business regarding one of your students." "What student? What official business?" Ashford demanded, his voice rising with indignation. "Marcus Johnson," Lieutenant Torres replied crisply. "We understand there have been some misunderstandings about his character and activities." Ms. Whitmore appeared beside Ashford, her face pale as she took in the sight of 12 decorated combat veterans. "This is highly irregular. Students are not under military jurisdiction." Sergeant Tank Williams smiled, and the expression was not entirely friendly. "Ma'am, when someone attacks one of our own, they become very much our business." Derek Manning and his group of friends watched from down the hallway, their earlier confidence evaporating as they realized the homeless man Marcus had been helping was somehow connected to these intimidating military personnel. "Who exactly are you here to see?" Ashford asked, trying to regain control of the situation. Before anyone could answer, Commander Riley appeared in the main hallway. He had cleaned up significantly, his beard trimmed, wearing a decent shirt, his military bearing restored. The transformation was remarkable, and several students who had seen him around campus gasped in recognition. "Attention!" Captain Stone called out, and all 12 SEALs snapped to perfect formation. The entire hallway fell silent as Riley walked past the assembled students and faculty, his team falling into step behind him. The homeless veteran they thought they knew was clearly something far more significant than anyone had imagined. Principal Ashford, Riley said, his voice carrying command authority, I believe you've been having some discussions about Marcus Johnson's character and activities. Ashford's mouth opened and closed without sound as he struggled to process this development. You see, Tank added conversationally, Marcus has been taking care of our commander for the past 2 weeks. Feeding him, treating him with respect, showing the kind of character we recognize and value in the military. Torres stepped forward. We understand some people have been questioning his integrity, suggesting he might be involved in criminal activity. We're here to clarify that situation. Ms. Whitmore found her voice. I don't understand. Who exactly are you people? Riley smiled for the first time in months. We're Navy SEALs, ma'am. And Marcus Johnson has been showing kindness to a decorated combat veteran who's been going through a difficult transition. Instead of being praised for his compassion, we understand he's been harassed and humiliated. Derek Manning felt his world tilting as he realized the magnitude of his mistake. The vagrant he had mocked, the homeless man he had used to attack Marcus, was a highly decorated military officer surrounded by America's elite warriors. Stone's voice cut through the stunned silence. We'd like to speak with anyone who has concerns about Marcus Johnson's character. We have some perspective to share about the young man who's been taking care of our teammate. As word spread throughout the school that Marcus Johnson was under the protection of 12 Navy SEALs, the narrative that had been building against him crumbled completely. Students who had laughed at his humiliation yesterday were now staring in awe at the military personnel who had come to defend him. The battle lines were drawn, and suddenly the wealthy bullies found themselves facing opponents who understood real warfare. The school's main conference room had never hosted a gathering quite like this. 12 Navy SEALs in dress uniforms sat around a large table, their collective presence transforming the space into something resembling a military briefing room. Principal Ashford, Ms. Whitmore, Derek Manning, and his mother Mrs. Manning occupied chairs that suddenly felt very small. Commander Riley stood at the head of the table, his transformation from homeless veteran to military leader complete. The man who had been dismissed as a vagrant now commanded the room with undeniable authority. Ladies and gentlemen, Riley began, his voice carrying the weight of command, I want to share some information about Marcus Johnson that you might find illuminating. Captain Stone placed a folder on the table. For the past 15 days, while surviving on the streets after a difficult transition from military service, I have been kept alive by the daily kindness of a 17-year-old student at this school. Mrs. Manning shifted uncomfortably. I don't understand what this has to do with the disciplinary issues we've been discussing. The disciplinary issues, Lieutenant Torres replied with ice in her voice, appear to stem from your son's harassment of a young man whose only crime was showing compassion to a homeless veteran. Derek's face had gone pale. I didn't know he was military. He looked like. Like what? Sergeant Tank Williams asked, his voice dangerously quiet. Like someone who didn't deserve basic human respect. Riley pulled out photos from his phone, images Marcus had never seen him take, showing their daily lunch meetings, Marcus sharing his food, the two of them in conversation. While I was at my lowest point, questioning whether I had any place in civilian society after 22 years of military service, this young man treated me with dignity. He never asked my name, never demanded my story, never made me feel like charity. He just shared what little he had. Principal Ashford's voice was barely a whisper. 22 years of service. Captain Stone opened the folder and began reading. Commander James Ghost Riley. Navy SEALs for 22 years. 3 tours in Afghanistan, 2 in Iraq, classified operations in 7 other countries. Navy Cross, Silver Star, 3 Bronze Stars, Purple Heart with Oak Leaf Cluster. The room fell silent except for the sound of Mrs. Manning's sharp intake of breath. Distinguished Service Cross, Torres continued. Combat Action Ribbon, Navy Presidential Unit Citation. He led the team that rescued 12 hostages in Somalia, the operation that prevented the bombing of the embassy in Yemen, and approximately 40 other classified missions that saved countless American lives. Ms. Whitmore's face had gone white. "We had no idea." "You had no idea because you never bothered to look beyond your prejudices," Tank said bluntly. "You saw a homeless man and assumed he was worthless. Marcus Johnson saw a human being who needed help." Riley stepped forward. "While you were questioning Marcus's character, suggesting he was involved in criminal activity, he was demonstrating the kind of values we fight to protect. Compassion. Service. Sacrifice." Derek found his voice, though it came out as a croak. "Marcus never said anything about who you were." "Because he never asked," Riley replied. "He didn't help me because of what I'd done or who I used to be. He helped me because I was hungry and he had food to share. That's character, son. That's the kind of person your school should be proud to have." Mrs. Manning was staring at the table, the weight of her prejudices becoming impossible to bear. "We made a terrible mistake." Captain Stone's voice was like steel. "You made a choice to attack a good kid because he didn't fit your narrow definition of acceptable. That wasn't a mistake, that was a failure of character." Principal Ashford finally found his voice. "Commander Riley, Mr. Johnson, we owe you both a profound apology. The school's behavior has been inexcusable." "Apologies are a start," Torres said. "But Marcus Johnson deserves more than words. He deserves recognition for the kind of character this institution should be teaching." As the full weight of the situation settled over the room, everyone present began to understand that they had just witnessed something extraordinary, not just the revelation of Riley's identity, but the demonstration of true character in the face of systematic prejudice and harassment. Marcus Johnson, the scholarship student they had dismissed and attacked, had just been revealed as someone who embodied the very best of American values. And 12 of America's finest warriors had come to make sure everyone understood exactly what that meant. Word of the Navy SEALs' arrival spread beyond Lincoln High School within hours. By afternoon, news vans had gathered in the parking lot, and social media was buzzing with videos of 12 elite warriors defending a teenage student who had shown kindness to their commander. The most significant arrival, however, came at 1,400 hours when a black sedan with government plates pulled up to the school's main entrance. Vice Admiral Thomas Bradley, commanding officer of Naval Special Operations Command, stepped out in full dress uniform, his chest heavy with ribbons representing 30 years of distinguished service. Principal Ashford, who had been dealing with increasingly frantic calls from the school board and district officials, nearly collapsed when he was informed that a Navy admiral was requesting an immediate meeting. The conference room that had hosted the morning's revelation now welcomed an even more imposing gathering. Vice Admiral Bradley sat at the head of the table, flanked by Commander Riley and the SEAL team. Across from them sat the school's administration, Derek Manning, and his increasingly uncomfortable family. "Ladies and gentlemen," Admiral Bradley began, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to briefing Congress and the Pentagon, "I flew here from Norfolk today because I believe this situation represents something important about American values." He gestured toward Riley. "Commander Riley served under my command for 8 years. He led some of the most dangerous missions in our nation's recent history. When he was struggling with his transition to civilian life, one of your students stepped up to help him." Mrs. Manning, who had spent the morning in shocked silence, finally spoke. "Admiral, we had no idea about any of this. If we had known—" "That's exactly the problem," Admiral Bradley interrupted. "You treated Commander Riley and Marcus Johnson poorly because you didn't know their value. True character is how you treat people when you think it doesn't matter." He pulled out an official document. "I'm here to present Marcus Johnson with a Naval Special Operations Community Civilian Service Award. It's given to civilians who demonstrate exceptional support for our personnel and embody the values we fight to protect." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Marcus Johnson, the student they had tried to expel for suspicious behavior, was about to receive one of the military's highest civilian honors. Furthermore, Admiral Bradley continued, "Marcus has been accepted into the Naval Academy Prep program with a full scholarship, should he choose to pursue it. His actions over the past 2 weeks demonstrate exactly the kind of character we value in future naval officers." Derek Manning stared at his hands, the weight of his actions crushing down on him. "Sir, I need to apologize. What I did to Marcus was wrong. I was cruel and unfair." "Son," Admiral Bradley replied, "recognizing your mistakes is the first step toward becoming a better person. I suggest you learn from this experience." Principal Ashford stood nervously. "Admiral, what can the school do to make this right?" "You can start by implementing programs to support homeless veterans in your community," Admiral Bradley replied. "Commander Riley has agreed to head up a new initiative connecting schools with veteran services. You can also review your policies about how you treat students from different economic backgrounds." Ms. Whitmore, who had remained silent throughout the meeting, finally spoke. "I need to tender my resignation. My behavior toward Marcus was inexcusable. I allowed my prejudices to cloud my judgment as an educator." Admiral Bradley nodded approvingly. "That takes courage, ma'am. I respect that decision." As the meeting concluded, Admiral Bradley stood and addressed the room one final time. "Everyone here has witnessed something important today. You've seen what real character looks like in Marcus Johnson, and you've seen what happens when good people face adversity with dignity. I hope you'll remember these lessons." Outside in the hallway, news crews captured the moment when Admiral Bradley personally presented Marcus with his award, surrounded by 12 Navy SEALs standing at attention. The image would become iconic, a young black student receiving military honors for his compassion and character. The story that began with daily acts of kindness had become a national example of what America could be at its best. And everyone involved understood that their lives had been fundamentally changed by witnessing true character in action. 6 months later, Lincoln High School looked the same from the outside, but everything meaningful had changed within its walls. The main hallway now featured a prominent display honoring Marcus Johnson's Civilian Service Award alongside information about supporting local veterans. Marcus stood in the same hallway where Derek had publicly humiliated him, but now he wore the uniform of a Naval Academy midshipman candidate. He was home on leave, visiting the school that had nearly expelled him for the crime of showing kindness. Commander Riley, clean-shaven and wearing civilian clothes that fit properly, worked from an office in the school's new Veterans Outreach Center. His transition program had helped 17 homeless veterans find housing and support services, turning his personal struggle into a mission to help others. "Hard to believe it's the same place," Marcus commented as he and Riley walked through the corridors together. "Same building, different spirit," Riley agreed. "Amazing what happens when people start seeing character instead of just circumstances." Derek Manning approached them hesitantly. Over the past months, he had worked to rebuild his reputation through community service and genuine efforts to understand his privilege. The transformation hadn't been easy, but it had been real. "Marcus, Commander Riley," Derek said, his voice carrying none of its former arrogance. "I wanted to thank you both." Marcus looked at him curiously. "Thank us for what?" "For showing me what I was becoming," Derek replied. "For helping me understand that being wealthy doesn't make me better than anyone else. I've learned more about character in the past 6 months than in the previous 17 years." The three walked together toward the auditorium, where a special assembly was being held to honor the school's new veteran support program. Principal Ashford, who had survived the scandal but learned from it, was introducing programs designed to support all students regardless of their economic background. Ms. Martinez, now head of the counseling department, had implemented policies ensuring that students facing difficulties received support rather than suspicion. The change in school culture was dramatic and positive. As they took their seats, Marcus reflected on the journey that had brought them all to this point. A simple decision to share his lunch had revealed connections none of them could have imagined, changed lives in ways they were still discovering, and taught everyone involved about the true meaning of character. "You know what the best part is?" Riley asked quietly as Admiral Bradley took the stage to speak about the program's success. "What's that?" 12 other schools have started similar programs because of what happened here. Your kindness isn't just changing lives locally, it's inspiring change across the country. As Admiral Bradley began speaking about service, sacrifice, and the importance of supporting those who serve, Marcus felt overwhelmed by the ripple effects of simply treating another human being with dignity. After the ceremony, as the SEAL team prepared to return to their base, Tank Williams pulled Marcus aside. "Kid, you saved our commander when he couldn't save himself. But more than that, you reminded all of us why we serve. Thank you for that." As Marcus watched his military friends depart, he understood that the most important lesson hadn't been about the power of connections or the importance of military service. It had been about the radical impact of treating every person with dignity and respect, regardless of their circumstances. The young man who had been accused of criminal activity for showing kindness to a homeless veteran was now preparing to serve his country as a naval officer. The veteran who had been dismissed as worthless was now helping others navigate their own difficult transitions. And a school that had nearly lost its way had found it again by learning to see character where they had previously seen only economic status. Sometimes the smallest acts of kindness create the largest waves of change, transforming not just individual lives but entire communities. Marcus Johnson's decision to share his lunch had done exactly that, proving that true strength lies not in wealth or status, but in the simple choice to care for others. Dear friend, this story reminds us that heroes often walk among us unrecognized, and that our treatment of those society overlooks reveals our true character. Veterans, homeless individuals, and those facing difficult circumstances deserve our respect and compassion, not our judgment and dismissal. Marcus Johnson's simple act of sharing his lunch teaches us that kindness requires no justification, no explanation, and no reward beyond the knowledge that we've helped another human being. When we choose compassion over prejudice, understanding over assumptions, we create ripples of positive change that extend far beyond what we can imagine. Every person has dignity and worth, regardless of their current circumstances. True strength lies in lifting others up, not in tearing them down. If this message touched your heart, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more stories that celebrate the power of human kindness and challenge us to be better.